Back on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk KFYO. Joining us on the phones, always a pleasure to visit with our next guest. And we could probably spend the next hour or so with our next guest, but we don't have that long. But we do get to talk at least a little bit about the 2020 election with the Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Texas, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Good morning. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Chad. Hope you are well. Excuse me. Working through the finish line for Tuesday for the president, for John Cornyn, for our Texas House. I have a tight Senate race, Pete Flores. Some of your listeners probably live in his area. His district goes from the edge of El Paso all the way over to San Antonio, and we want to get him reelected. And so we're working 25 hours a 24-hour day. The president has called me twice in the last 5 days, early in the morning, to see how things are going. And that guy never sleeps, never stops. I told him he called me Sunday morning, I guess it was. I'd watched him in Kenosha on Fox that night doing a rally. I said, Mr. President, I'm sure you didn't get back to the White House till after 1 a.m. And he said, we got to do what we have to do. And, and that's what you do. And I believe he's going to win the election. Pennsylvania is the key, obviously, in that. He'll win Texas, but we want to be sure it's by a strong enough margin to pull everyone with him.
What do you think that is? I mean, right now, what do you think the margin is right now of victory for the president? What would be a good margin for the president to win by?
Well, Rick Perry once said, and I've never forgotten this line, someone said, well, you only won by 1%. He said, but I'm 100% governor. And so any margin is a good margin. Keeping the Texas House, for example, last election, we had some Texas House members that won by less than 1,000 votes, won by 100 and 130 votes. The president's not going to be that close. I think, he won by 9 last time. I think the margin this time is 4 to 8. That's what I've been saying for the last couple of months. And it depends all on turnout. He's not going to lose the election, but it's the turnout that's key. And Chad, the turnout in rural Texas, and I want all your listeners to hear this clearly, is so important because in terms of what that margin is, let me give you this as an example. Many people who live in an area where they know the president's going to win, or any Republican for that matter, but they know, this is a red area, and they say, I don't need to go vote. Here's why it's so important. Rural Texas, east, west, and central Texas, represent just about 50% of the total vote. It's 1% here, 2% there, 3% there, but when you add it together statewide, it's 50% of the vote. The other 50% of the vote is in Harris, Dallas, Bexar, Travis, and 1 or 2 suburban counties. And so it's really rural against urban suburban. And Dallas and Harris and Travis and Bexar have gotten bluer, not redder.
Right.
And so the difference is, for example, in 2016 and 2018 when Abbott and I ran, the president lost those 4 counties, Abbott and I lost those 4 counties, but we won. But overall, we won 241 out of 254 counties. So the cumulative total of rural Texas is what keeps us red. And really, that's the pattern all over the country now, Chad. For example, Pennsylvania is all red except Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. And you can go down all the states that look like that. Yeah. Florida is all red except their big cities. So here's the key. It's not important. The president's going to win rural Texas. But it's a difference if he wins it 70-30, which is that's our target, instead of 68-32, because
right.
It's a lot of votes when you add them together. So my message for rural Texas is don't say, oh, the president doesn't need my vote. Your vote in rural Texas is as important as any vote in big city Texas, because it's really rural Texas against the very blue, very Democrat, very leftist big cities and counties in our state.
Visiting with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, I want to ask you about a story that came out. I guess it started coming out over the weekend, and then yesterday it was updated over at the Hill about the Texas to send out some National Guard troops to 5 different cities in Texas, really preparing for Election Day. Does that mean that you and other statewide officials believe that there's going to be trouble on Election Day?
Well, we have to look at past experience. 2 things are at foot here, Chad, and one is Texas did not have the issues that other cities had around the country during the summer months of chaos and riots in the street. But we had our share of problems. And had it not been for our state police, when we called them out, we had about an extra 800 to 1,000 troopers in Austin. The plan for the protesters was to take over that city, and that mayor is very leftist there, Steve Adler. He's defunded the police. Had we not had 1,000 troopers to protect Austin about 2 months ago, they were going to set up a CHOP city or a city like Seattle. That was their goal. They wanted to take the Austin Police Department building and set it on fire, and so we had to back them up because the leftist mayor Steve Adler in Austin said you can't use beanbags, can't use rubber bullets, can't use tear gas. Well, then you leave the police. The only thing they can do is hand-to-hand combat and shoot someone, and that's you don't want to get to that point. So we are prepared for the worst. And we will, you can't wait till, election night, 2 hours before the polls close to call out the guard. So we are staging people in case we have problems. I do think, Chad, if the president wins on Tuesday night, and it may not be finalized till Wednesday or Thursday or a week, but if it looks like he's ahead, and I believe, again, if they don't steal it from him in North Carolina and Pennsylvania, which is our greatest concern, we think he'll win in those two states. But, they can steal a lot of votes in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and a few cities in North Carolina. And you have Democrat-controlled states, remember this, Chad. In Texas, look at all the fights we've been having with the courts and the county judges and the mayors in our Democrat counties and cities in Texas. And we've got a Republican governor, Republican attorney general, Republican lieutenant governor, Republican secretary of state. So we've been able to push back. Imagine all the games that are being played in Texas if they were playing out in a state like North Carolina and Pennsylvania to have a Democrat attorney general and a Democrat governor, a Democrat lieutenant governor, a Democrat elections official. So I'm very worried about that aspect. But if the president wins on Tuesday night, Chad, or whenever that's decided or is way ahead, I expect to be a lot of trouble in a lot of our cities around America. Hopefully not Texas, But we have to be prepared. Protect our citizens is number one goal.
But before I let you go, I want to ask you, bringing it a little bit closer to home, as far as statewide elections or just, the Texas Senate and the Texas House, how confident are you that the Texas House will remain in Republican control, and same for the Senate?
Well, very confident that we keep them. I think we gain or lose 2 or 3 seats. And I know that's a little bit, we have 83 Republicans now and there's 67 Democrats. They need 9 seats to take over the House. And we lost 12 the last time, and I think we can pick some of those up, and we could lose 1 or 2 this time in some districts that have turned blue in our cities and our counties. The real difference here, Chad, is, this is the first election that we do not have straight ticket voting.
Right.
And so, in a lot of rural counties, a lot of your listeners who are listening, the ballot's not too long. But in Harris County, for example, where Houston is, that ballot has somewhere near 100 people to elect on it. And so how many people will go all the way down? When Beto O'Rourke lost to Ted Cruz, the damage he did was that in Harris County, for example, almost 80%, 8 out of 10 Democrats pushed one button. So everybody down ballot won. And they didn't have to campaign. They didn't have to tell people what they were thinking, what they were doing, who they were. What they believed in. So now everyone has to go down ballot. So in these bigger counties where you have long ballots, it's up to a Republican candidate or their Democrat opponent who's going to do the best to get their voters to go all the way down the ballot. So, in the rural Texas, I want to be sure that, again, a lot of the ballots are smaller, but they're still, in our bigger cities in rural Texas, be sure you can still vote Republican straight ticket. You just have to go down one by one by one. We need to get our railroad commissioner, very important. The Democrats are trying to steal that state. It's the only statewide person we have on the ticket. We have to get our Republican railroad commissioner elected. He's brand new. Yeah. So that's important to go down the ballot. So some of those House seats, Chad, in the bigger areas are going to determine who convinced their voters to be sure to go down the ballot low enough to vote for them. And so that's why I'm not quite sure how 2 or 3 seats may turn out. I think they're going to be seats literally won or lost by less than a couple of hundred votes. But I believe we're going to keep the House. And again, the president will win and Cornyn will win. The margins will depend on all of our great friends and our patriots in West, Central, and East Texas who say, I don't want the president just to win. I want him to stomp the Democrats here 75-25, whether it's East Central or West Texas. And the bigger rural Texas will determine the final margin of how much he wins by. Is it 4, Is it 6? Is it 8? Is it 3? Whatever that final margin is.
Very good, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Let's visit again soon. There's a lot we could get into. It's going to be a long night on election night, it looks like, and we'll visit again soon.
Hey, I appreciate you, Chad, and we got session coming up, so we'll get back with you before the end of the year and kind of preview that. And as we get ready for session, I want everybody out there to just put it in the hands of the Lord. Lord's in control of everything, Chad, but we have to do our part. He expects us to do our part, so that's what we're going to do.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Chad. Appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you. That's Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick here on the Chad Hasty Show, News Talk, KFYO.